Okay, so this is going to be just a very quick introduction to AAS meetings in general, but specifically the online virtual AAS meeting in January 2021. So if it was a regular AAS meeting, I would tell you that you are going to be exhausted. I think it's probably true that you're going to be exhausted here too. I don't know how all of you have planned to do this, whether you plan to not do school classes on these days and do AAS stuff all day, or if you're going to do a full day of classes and then do AAS in the afternoons and evenings. I don't know what your plans are, but I expect that you're going to be some flavor of exhausted here too. In a real meeting, I would say that everyone is going to be overstimulated and under-caffeinated. I think that's probably true even with the online version, because it is hard. It's hard to pay attention for long periods of time when the information flow in your direction is so relentless and high density. But everyone is in the same boat. Everyone is overstimulated and under-caffeinated and tired. The other important thing to remember is that you're not going to understand everything, and that's okay. Nobody understands everything at a AAS meeting. Sometimes that's the fault of the presenters because they haven't conveyed their ideas very well. Sometimes it's just because they haven't explained terms. Sometimes it's just because you can't keep up with the jargon. That's fine. Everyone is in the same boat, right? You do need to still pay attention to your body, whether it's an in-person meeting or an online one. Get something to drink, get something to eat, and take a rest if you need to. That's even easier in the online meeting because you can watch talks asynchronously even after the meeting is over. So there's basically two kinds of presentations. In a traditional AAS meeting, there's talks and then there's posters. So in terms of talks, in a traditional meeting, there's plenary talks where there's nothing else going on, and you're supposed to, everyone in the meeting is supposed to attend the plenary talk. And in a real physical meeting, there's usually 4 of those or so per day. There's also rapid fire parallel sessions where every speaker is like 5 minutes. And the expectation is during those parallel sessions that you would step in and out. And in a regular meeting, I'd recommend you try to do that quietly. In an online version, it's different. There are fewer plenaries per day, but it's still the case that there's nothing else going on in that time window. And the parallel sessions, it's even easier to step in and out as you need to between parallel sessions. Because, for example, you don't have to hike from one end of the convention center to the other to see 2 sessions at once. There will be a lot of posters in a traditional meeting. They're largely printed out like this, and they change every day. The same posters are not up all week. Online, they have these things called iPosters, which are highlighted once per meeting. In other words, your poster doesn't get highlighted all week, but it's available all week and even after the meeting. If it was a real physical meeting, you'd wish that you could, sit down more often than you will, than you would otherwise. But in a virtual meeting, of course, it's easier, and take a time out if you need to. So you are attending the AAS meeting for many different reasons. You may have many reasons beyond even just the ones that I'm about to verbalize to go to this meeting. But the reason that NITARP paid for you to be here is to be a scientist. So yes, obviously your educators are students, and by all means, network like crazy, learn about opportunities, make connections that will be helpful to you later. We've had more than one NITARP student talk their way into a summer job at their future college because of the networking that they've done at these meetings. So it can be very powerful and very valuable, and I encourage you to do that. But you are also here because you're a scientist. Don't exclude yourself from asking a question or some other opportunity because you don't feel like a scientist. You are a scientist. You did the work. You're presenting your results. You're a scientist. And what that means is that you have to look with a critical eye at things that you see at this meeting. Not everything presented at this meeting is correct. And part of your job as a scientist is to see if it makes sense, to see if what other people are presenting seems right. I mean, certainly people aren't going into this knowingly presenting wrong things. But one main purpose for a conference presentation is presenting new work. In other words, I've done these steps. Does this make sense? And it certainly is the case that some fraction of the work that's presented here has not been completely thought out. So there's going to be stuff that's wrong. And especially since you guys are going to be presenting again next year, it's really important to look and see what works in a poster, what doesn't work in a poster. there's various versions of bad poster bingo that are floating around the internet, because all these scientific meetings, not just astronomy, has a poster session, and everyone sees bad posters and somehow they still keep getting generated. So hopefully some of this is minimized with iPosters, but maybe not, maybe it'll be worse. So the community at large, in terms of the, if you were in a physical meeting, the community around the convention center is usually welcoming, because, if you go to a convention, if I owned a restaurant, I would set it up next to a convention center because you'd get tons of business. But in this case, obviously it's different. The community of astronomers is welcoming, is, by and large, they are welcoming to new people in the field. And astronomers love to talk about their research, like muggles like talking about their children. So you don't believe me. My husband, before I'd even met him, was in graduate school and was so tired of his college and high school friends sending out Christmas cards with their children. He sent this picture as a Christmas card one year. He's holding the instrument that he built. So astronomers, they're to them, this is a super important part of their lives, and they're going to love to talk about it. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't go in with your head, metaphorically with your head down shuffling, I'm just a student, or I'm just a teacher, and just ask your question. If they don't answer it in terms that make sense to you, then maybe it's appropriate to say, hey, I'm new at this, can you please explain your jargon? And that's important. If you're in a physical meeting, they could read your name tag that would say such and such high school, but they, in this context, they won't, right? So you may have to, because you're only going to be interacting with these people for the most part by text communications, you may have to be more aggressive about saying, hey, I'm a beginner, can you please help me understand what you're doing? But you don't need to start out by saying, I'm just a fill in the blank. And especially if it's a youngish person that's presenting, they're going to be thrilled to explain what they're doing. And in fact, you may have to beg them to stop, which online is, I think, a little easier because you could just leave. In person, it's harder because it's harder to disentangle from a conversation in person. So sadly, there are some Sheldon Coopers, like from Big Bang Theory, people who are just socially inept and very arrogant, and all you can do is walk away from those people. Sadly, there are some people who, like Howard Wolowitz before he started dating Bernadette, in other words, skeevy, and I don't have a good answer about how to avoid those people in general, online or otherwise. Most of us are much closer to Leonard, well-meaning, polite, social, smart, really, really, really happy to share what we're doing and respectful of everybody. But use your common sense. Back off if you get a strange vibe. Students and their teachers should be mindful of the fact that, by and large, the assumption is that everyone at this conference is at least in college, which means that everyone at this conference is probably at least 21. And especially since you can't be there in person, even if you look young, people don't know who you are. I mean, you can be anything you want on the internet, even a giant chicken, right? So you can people won't know who you are and where you're coming from. So if you're getting a weird vibe from a conversation, just leave. In general, this is a professional setting, which means that most people should be staying away from politics and religion. I do note that there was a sociology research article not too long ago that was studying the political leanings of scientists, and according to their results, astronomers were the most liberal of all the sciences, and scientists were already much more liberal than the general population. I don't know if that was a selection bias with the people that those researchers talked to. I don't know, but keep in mind that holidays are stressful times because you're dealing with relatives. And even if, it's worse, obviously, if you're going to physically visit relatives, which probably is not going to be an option for most people this year. But even just coping online with extended family can be stressful. And so as a result, people may forget those rules of professional behavior, and they may just assume that you're like everyone else at the meeting, in which case they may say things that they shouldn't. And I do apologize. Basically, you're in the clubhouse now, so smile and nod and back off. The online meeting format is going to be using something called the Virtual Fairs or vFairs software. They used this for the June AAS meeting, and so it was easier for them because they'd already learned the infrastructure to use it for all their subsequent meetings as well, including this one. So there is a pseudo convention center motif. This is what it looked like in June. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like in January, but it's going to be something like this, where it's going to look like a convention center and you can click around. There's all sorts of things to click in the image that will take you to like the posters or the exhibit hall or the talks, right? The talks are all going to be on Zoom and they are going to be recorded. And I have it on good authority that they're going to be posted later. And I don't know exactly what that means. Later meaning within an hour or later meaning within a week. I don't know. But even before all of this, the plenary talks were always recorded at the AAS meetings and posted later. But in that case, it meant like a month later. I think the time scale is going to be shorter for this, but I don't know. I don't know if the parallel sessions are recorded or if so, how to access them. I think they will be, but I don't know for sure. In June, when I did this online meeting, keeping track of where I was in time was the hardest because the time in my time zone is different than the time zone that they were operating in for the meeting because the AAS is in the Eastern time zone. They give all their times in Eastern. And so I had basically 2 electronic clocks up, and the vFair site itself and the AAS site itself did pretty well at indicating which time slot we were on so that you could get into the right Zoom room at the right time. There's a chat capability within vFairs. There's, of course, within the Zoom rooms themselves, there's Q&A features for talks, and they're apparently going to be running Slack channels for all sorts of conversations. And there's lots of ways to interact with other people at the meeting, by which I mean not just speakers, but also people who are staffing booths. I'll explain what that means in a second. This is what Slack looks like. This is a screenshot of the Slack app for laptops. They also have apps for tablets and phones. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty intuitive. You've got different, for each one of these Slack spaces, there's channels within that, and you can send direct messages within Slack, and then the conversations are in this main room here. This is from a meeting that's actually going on this week as I'm recording this. So this is not a AAS meeting. This is somebody else's meeting, but they've set up one channel for each major topic on each day. And then they also had additional channels for each poster so that people could ask individual questions. I think that would be really hard as a user or just a regular participant. But that's what they've done for this meeting. And you can see there's conversations and questions that happen about the talks after the talks. So what do you expect? So that the talks are either going to be long when nothing else is going on, or really rapid fire short with many held in parallel. Some of these talks are specifically aimed at undergrads or amateurs or other people who are new to the field. So you should probably specifically seek those out. In the physical AAS, you could actually attend the press conferences. I believe you can still do that online. In June, you could do that either by going to the Zoom room or following the YouTube live stream. The posters, there's of course posters from NITARP teams, but there's many, many, many more than just that. There's booths. So in a real physical meeting, this would actually be like a couple of tables and a backdrop and posters and people sitting going, hey, do you want to learn about my archive or my mission? But there's booths from industry, people who are building spacecraft in the aerospace industry, different missions, either upcoming ones or ones that are running now, publishers, book publishers, especially if you're an educator, you may be able to get free books from these publishers. And of course, archives like URSA have booths as well. So all of that is useful information. There's also things called town halls, and I sort of put this in the category of astropolitics. Usually that's meant to be discussions about different funding agencies or upcoming government related things. There's also something called Astro 2020. So astronomy is small enough that we have something called the decadal survey, which means that every decade there's a big committee of people that try to prioritize what the community wants to do with funding and in the next for the next 10 years. So we were in the middle of this process last year, and of course it's all been thrown into disarray and longer timescales than it was originally supposed to. So you may still see discussions about Astro 2020 at this AAS meeting. I don't know for sure. I don't know if the committee is already writing, is done taking input. I'm just not sure. Typically, an in-person January AAS meeting is more than 3,000 people. As of today, when I'm recording this, I can see that there's 1,700 people registered already for the January AAS. Just for context, a June AAS meeting is usually only, like less than 1,000. And there were, maybe 800, 500, 800. There were 1,400 people who registered for the online June meeting. So that is much larger than a typical June meeting. So I'm expecting there to be much more than 1,700 people registered by the time we get to January. So how do you figure out what to do? I do have a NITARP AAS worksheet, which again will make more sense in person than virtual, but I'll still mail it out to you guys. It looks roughly like this. It spells out, here are the main reasons why people go to a AAS meeting: networking, learn about your own science, see other work on your own science, learn about new science, learn about public policy, learn about observatories, learn about industry, visit publishers to get new books, learn about educational opportunities and other educational efforts going on, and looking at posters. And so there's a paragraph and suggestions of things to do in each one of these categories. I would definitely collaborate with others, put your heads together, figure out what makes sense to attend, and then talk about it afterwards. If you were in person, there would be an app and a booklet that you could pick up, but that's not so relevant now. There is a website, and I think there's a schedule planner, but I am not a big fan of the schedule planner on the website. I still think the block schedule is the easiest. So this is how you read it. It looks like this. So it's telling you quite prominently that time is in the Eastern time zone. So these you see is one time in one box all the way across. That means that only one thing is going on at a time. So these are the plenary talks I'd mentioned where nothing else is going on. They're definitely recorded, and I don't know how much later they're going to post them, but they're definitely recorded. Now here's the rapid fire parallel sessions, right? So for here, each of these will have their own Zoom link. I don't know if they're going to be recorded or not, but there's lots and lots of talks in each one of these sessions, and they're all held in parallel, between 12 and 1:30. Just because this one is down here doesn't mean it starts later than these guys in this row. All of them start at noon. And then they have splinter sessions, which are sort of special flavors of these rapid fire, but they're still in parallel, still more than one at the same time. Then they have things called exhibitor webinars. They're designed to specifically show you things that are going on at the booths. They're meant to be demonstrating a product of some sort or an opportunity. This is not science results. This is more like tools, right? Here are some of the town halls, like I mentioned. And then here's some networking opportunities. Here's another plenary talk, and then more webinars. Then later in the day, we've explicitly got interactive exhibit hall and iPoster session. So the iPosters are the online version of the printed posters. iPoster Plus is this iPoster interface plus a short talk, and iPoster is just a regular, poster within the interface. Again, there's many of these going on in parallel, but all of these are definitely accessible after the meeting. If you want to talk to the person who's presenting it, you need to make sure that you're there. So if the poster is numbered 142, 142.01, say, that means it's the first poster in session 142. And if you want to talk to those authors, you should make sure to be there between 4:10 and 5:40 on Monday, Eastern time. But it may be that you can't get there because it has some kind of a schedule collision, in which case you can still view it. You can still view the poster after the fact. And then if you have questions, you can email the person. And then the person may or may not choose to be metaphorically standing by their poster on Tuesday and Wednesday, right? Because the Monday posters all start with a 1 in the first digit. And that person may or may not be planning to stand by their poster, their metaphorical poster, on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, because Tuesdays, all the posters that start with 200 something will be highlighted. And then Wednesdays, 300 something will be highlighted. Note that it does say interactive exhibit hall. This is one of the most frustrating things about the June AAS. I was the primary staffer for the URSA portion of our booth, and there was nobody. I had nobody come and talk to me, like, at all, right? So please, please, please go find a booth. You will break up the boardroom for the staffers, I guarantee you, if you say, hey, can you just tell me about what you're sharing here? And they'll be happy to share what they're doing, what they're, why they're staffing a booth. And then the end of the day, more webinars, another plenary. And then in the evening, they tend to have some kind of networking opportunity, more social kinds of events. Those are not going to be recorded because the whole nature of it is supposed to be more dynamic, more interactive. And different, they have different targets each day, different subjects each day. So last thoughts, it is going to be harder to do this online than it is in person, like everything else in life. But the community is welcoming and very supportive, and you should definitely ask questions. And remember that no one understands everything in these meetings. It's not at all like a day of classes where if you didn't understand your 4th period class, if you lost sync with the teacher after the first 10 minutes, then you're in trouble and you need to talk. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. So follow as much of the talks as you can. Sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes the people just don't give good talks. Write down the questions you have and either ask them of the speaker when it's appropriate, either later, right after the talk or on Slack, or bring them up with your teacher or your NITARP team or your scientist later. Rewatch the video later because it might make more sense when you watch it a second time. Go and check out conversations in Slack. Maybe there's some clarification or discussions that are happening on Slack to help you understand what happens in these talks. But, it should be fun. It should be interesting. And you should be able to watch a lot of talks because, it's going to be an all online meeting. So you should be able to attend either synchronously or asynchronously, a lot of different talks, and therefore learn a lot of different things.